Hello, hobby friends. I'm Jason, and thank you for joining me again here on Level Up Hobbies. Now, today is the second part of my series in painting Lionel Johnson. It's been a little bit of a gap between the first one and this, and I very much apologize for that. So today we're going to start painting the interior part of his cloak. And for that, I kind of took a different approach than you would see on the box art. Theirs is kind of yellowish to a white, and to me I don't know, it just didn't sell the cream color that I like. So I'm taking a different approach than they did, and for this I'm going to base coat all of the interior lining of the cloak and his cape there with Xandri dust. And as always, when you're painting on miniatures, make sure you thin your paint so it flows on smoothly. You don't want this to look really thick and chunky. So I have thinned this out and painted on here very carefully because I've already painted up his green armor, and I do not want to have to go back and repaint any of that if I can help it. It's possible, it's just time consuming if I would have to. Now this will take a couple of coats to get full coverage. Make sure you wait between applications are dry before you add the next layer. Otherwise you'll make tide marks where you're pulling up paint that's already wet and painting over paint that's dry. So just be very careful, paint it on slowly, take your time. There's really no rush for this. If you want it to look good, the best thing I can tell you to have is patience. And as you can see here, I did keep him in sub-assemblies just for ease of painting that cloak that goes on his back. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to get in there behind him to get that painted and looking well. And here we have the completed, well, not completed, but the base coat is completed on this interior lining of the cloak here. As you can see, it's very nice, really smooth, and this is what I'm looking for. This is why you thin your paint and just build it up gradually. And when you're ready, I took some Skeleton Horde contrast paint and I thinned it out quite a bit with contrast medium. And I'm just going to start glazing this over all of the interior lining here, everything that you painted with the Xandri dust. And I don't want it to pool or get too dark, so I'm going to move this around and just adjust it as I need to, as I'm painting it on. I've kind of got a smaller brush here. I mean, it's not too small. It's like a 3, but you could go bigger on a surface this large and just paint it on. Just control it. Don't let it pool up. And now that this is dry, what we're going to do is go in and we're going to even up these high spots. So you can see there's some blotchiness there. So we're going to go back to that Xandri dust and just make a glaze out of it. And you can do this by either thinning it down with water or a glazing medium or Lamian medium, anything like that, whatever your choice. But I thin it down to the consistency of kind of like thin milk, almost like what you'd put through your airbrush. And I'll load my brush and then kind of wipe the excess off on a paper towel. And then I just lightly start glazing this on the higher regions of the miniature. You're going to let that dry, and then you're going to do it again, and then let that dry, and then do it again. And what you're doing is you're just gradually building up that color, so you're not left with these definite separations from that shadow and then the highlight color or main color. Now the whole process is going to take numerous coats, so it's not a fast process that we're doing right here. Once that's dry and you're happy with the coverage, we're going to move on to pretty much the first highlight. And for this highlight, what I did is I mixed approximately 50-50 of the Xandri dust and then also Ushabti bone. Again, I'm going to thin this down to a nice glaze consistency and just start layering it up. Do the layer, let that dry, and then come back, and do another layer. And the whole time you're going to be painting a smaller and smaller surface area. So you're going to leave some of that Xandri dust farther down into the shadows. That's going to transition into the 50-50 mix. And then from there, I'm going to work on the next highlight, which is going to be straight Ushabti bone. So this whole process is not something that you're going to knock out really quick, but it is going to give you a very nice transitions from your shadows to your highlights. And here I'm just testing the model to see how it's looking and whether or not the lights and shadows are playing well on one another, because the different parts of this cloak will look differently because they're behind the figures, so they're going to be darker. So you don't want all of the surfaces to have the same highlight. One, it'll wash itself out and you won't have any definition. And two, it just doesn't look as realistic when something that is behind an object and encased in shadow has its, this bright highlight, on it. And speaking of highlights, we're going to move on to the next one, which is straight Ushabti bone, as I mentioned earlier. Again, you want to thin this to kind of a milk consistency. This is a much brighter color than the Ushabti bone and even the 50-50 mix. So you can see some stark differences if you're not careful. You can see them here, and whenever I notice that it's just a little bit too bright, I thin that Ushabti bone just out a little bit more. And what you can do here is, if you're worried about it, just dip your brush in some water, wipe it off, and just kind of feather that into the previous transition. But you're going to go through here and just work on these highlights, build it up. Like I said, you're going to be working in a smaller area than you have previously. It's okay if you kind of venture a little bit farther down into that transition. It's not really going to hurt much because this mixture is very, very thin. So it really has its effect once you start building up those layers. So after I do like 3 layers of this, you're going to have an almost opaque Ushabti bone highlight. And now we're working on the final highlight. I swear, this is a 50-50 mix of Ushabti bone and ivory. I used ivory from Pro Acryl, but you can use something, like if you're using GW, you can use the Screaming Skull or Wraithbone, whichever one, and just build up this highlight. I stopped right here. You can take this even farther. You can take it for a brighter, either a bright ivory, or transition it more into a white if you want to. I thought I was very happy with the final highlight here, so I stopped. I didn't want to overdo it, but it's, everybody's, it's your own interpretation. So if you're happy with it, it's your model. I mean, take it as far as you want. And here we are with that final highlight fully just built up, and I'm very happy with the transitions that I got with this. It is, like I said, it's a little different than the GW paint or the GW scheme that they did. It seemed more yellow than tans. I really wasn't very fond of that, so I just kind of my own interpretation here. But yeah, so I'm very happy with how this turned out. I like the shadows, just really in those folds, and then just brightening up as it, billows out. I think all in all, this is going to turn out to be a really, really decent looking model. I mean, I love the sculpt, and I don't really think I've painted anything into this much detail. So yeah, it's really working my skills and helping me progress, as a miniature painter. And on that note, I think I'm going to cut it here. Thanks for joining me today as I painted up this interior cloak lining of Lion L. Johnson. Yeah, this is a fun model to paint. I'm really happy with how it's turning out, and having a lot of fun painting it. I can't wait to get it in with the rest of my Dark Angels. But yeah, so thanks again for joining me, and remember, I will see you next time. So build, paint, and play tabletop games. Later, folks.